Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Rabbi Daniel Levine. John Gambadoro is one of the most prolific and sought-after sports commentators in the industry. He has spent the last 29 years being the voice of Arizona sports, and today he joins us on the podcast to talk both about his career, how he grew up, and his recent trip to some of the concentration camps in Europe. Also joining us on the podcast today is my friend and friend of the podcast, Adam Fox, who was instrumental in connecting John Gambadoro to the podcast. Also, just a heads up for down the road, Adam has been instrumental in connecting me with a couple of high-profile guests, and in the coming weeks and months, we hope to have congressmen both from the Republican and Democratic Party coming and joining me on the podcast. I hope you like and subscribe, and now without further ado, I bring you John Gambadoro. So, John and Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Daniel, how are you?
Doing well. So, you are a, very renowned sports newscaster. I was just telling you offline that I am a lifelong San Diego sports fan. So Padres, when the Chargers used to live there. So I always had known that San Diego sports was a little bit of sort of like this sad, lachrymose story. I didn't know how sad it was until I was looking up statistics that San Diego is the biggest city to have never won any sports franchise.
My wife and son were in San Diego for a baseball tournament 2 weeks ago. It's a beautiful stadium. They went to a Padres-Mets game. Anytime we're in San Diego, we always go to a Padres game. I'm sad that they lost the Chargers. I really am. But as much as I hate the Dodgers, I am rooting for the Padres to win that division.
Okay, what is your, I just have to ask you, as a lifelong Charger fan, and the Chargers always seem to be the best team that never actually wins. What is your diagnosis? If you were made the Chargers GM or something like that next year, what would you do? Because we have so much talent and we never win.
I'm a little bit older than you, so I go back to when they had Dan Fouts as the quarterback, and they had some great teams with a lot of offense, but just not enough defense. They would get to the playoffs every year and they lose to the Dolphins or somebody else. And they're great teams led by Dan Fouts. I think they've got the right guy in Justin Herbert. It's just very difficult right now to get through Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen is finding that out. He's a great quarterback and the Bills are a great team, but they cannot get by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Amazing. So eventually I want to talk about your trip to Europe and Dachau and Eagles Nest,
Sure.
and how we connected. And I'm so thankful for Adam for really making the connection before, just because, I talked to so many people who are rabbis and Jewish historians and, all of those topics and politicians. I've never talked to a sports person before. If somebody is looking at your career and is wondering, how does somebody become sort of the voice of sports in a state like Arizona? What was your journey there? Were you always interested in sports, and how do you end up becoming a John Gambadoro?
So interesting story, because I'm probably the worst person that kids can come to and say, hey, how do you get to be what you did? Because I wasn't educated. I came from an immigrant family, working on my citizenship right now. My dad was born in Messina, Sicily. My mother's parents were born in Italy, in Rimini. So I didn't have much of an education. I couldn't go home to have my parents help me with my homework because they didn't know. Kids get A, B, C's, D's. My parents just cared if I passed or failed. If I got a 70, they were excited because I passed the class. They didn't understand the whole grading system. So I grew up in an all-Italian neighborhood. I love sports. I was a jock. I never smoked. I never took drugs. I don't gamble. I don't drink. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was just a jock. I played every sport imaginable. Loved them all. Loved sports. Was never good enough to do anything with it, but I just loved sports. Got a couple of breaks. One was in school when there was a curriculum day at the school, and it was a weekly newspaper, and I asked if I could write a story about our baseball team, and they said yes, and that was the start of my sports writing career. Then I got out here to Arizona after 7 years as a sports writer in New York, and I ended up getting the radio job on a whim. A program director was around me and heard me talking about a bag of potato chips and stuff like that with somebody else and thought I'd make a good radio host, and I just got right into it. So no education, never went to school for it. Never went to school for journalism, have no degree, barely got out of high school. And next year will be my 30th and final year doing the radio show.
Gambo, Daniel and I are very curious. So growing up, what was your interaction like with, did you have Jewish friends? Did you have Jewish classmates? What was your interaction overall or understanding of like the Jewish community just growing up where you were?
So, Adam, where I grew up, during the time that I grew up, people lived in neighborhoods. My friends were Rocco, Carmine, Frank. They were all Italian. I grew up in an all-Italian neighborhood. There was this sporadic, Irish person or Jewish person, but we had different neighborhoods. There was a Puerto Rican neighborhood. There was a Jewish in Long Island. There were Jewish neighborhoods in Long Island. There was a German neighborhood. There was an Irish neighborhood. So I grew up where there was very much neighborhoods. Like where I grew up was very, very much Italian. I did know a Jewish kid named Brian, and I went to his bar mitzvah. So I did go to one bar mitzvah when I was, I guess, 12, 13 years old, around that age.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I dated a girl named Erica Weinstein. But I had to tell my parents she was Italian because my parents only wanted me to date Italians. So if I dated a Greek girl, we had to pretend she was Italian. When I dated Erica, she looked Italian. She looked, a lot of to me, a lot of the Jewish and Italian girls kind of look the same. So, but anybody that wasn't Italian that I dated, we had to pass them off as Italian with my family just because they were very strict in that manner.
Did you learn anything from Brian or your then girlfriend just about Jewish life?
I remember having a dinner with a certain fish, and I remember Erica telling her mother, "Don't cook that fish. He's not going to like it." And she cooked it anyway because I don't think the mom liked me because I was Italian. So I remember that.
Did you like the fish, by the way?
No, is filter fish? Filter?
Yeah, gefilte fish.
Okay, yeah, no, not at all. Like, no. I mean, I grew up on pasta and carbonara and we ate fish, but it was if it crawled on the bottom of the sea. If it was clams or oysters or shellfish and things like that, we had obviously around Christmas time the seven fishes. We would eat that. So. No, so my knowledge of the Jewish community at that time was very minimal. I dated one Jewish girl and I went to one bar mitzvah, and that was pretty much it. Because again, like when I grew up, I was born in the 60s. At that time, a lot of the immigrants stuck together, and like the Italians, people stuck together because we were ostracized as Italians. People would call us wops, without papers, or so a lot of them stood together because strength in numbers type of thing. And that's the only people they trusted. I'll give you another story. Like I had full-blown pneumonia when I was a kid, full-blown pneumonia. I thought I was going to die. My mother took me in to go see our doctor, Dr. Greco. And he wasn't in that day, but there was another doctor there and he was Irish. And my mother said, "Well, when's Dr. Greco come back?" "Tomorrow." She goes, "Okay, we'll come back tomorrow." I didn't trust anybody. So like I had to spend a whole nother day with pneumonia because my mother had to wait until we could see the Italian doctor. It was crazy.
That's super interesting. Just to give you the history, and I totally agree with you. I think gefilte fish is probably the last thing you serve somebody that's coming to a Jewish house for the first time.
I think because they didn't like me, and I think they wanted me out. So they didn't.
Maybe. It's essentially, imagine like the sort of like hot dog of fish. You take like all the scraps and bones and whatever of the fish. In traditional, Eastern European communities, they would actually make it in the bathtub. And it was sort of like a very poor immigrant food of a group of people who didn't want to throw out any part of the fish. And then they sort of just like blend it together and package it into a little cake and then serve it to, poor bystanders like yourself. So I apologize on behalf of the Jewish community for you being served gefilte fish.
All right, Mrs. Weinstein. Yes, Mrs. Weinstein did. Yes, she did not want to make any pasta for me. She wanted to make the Jewish food.
Amazing. So how did you end up on your trip to Europe? I mean, what prompted you to want to visit some of the concentration camps in the first place? Was that on your radar? Was that the point of the trip?
So this is a great question. So I go to Italy, or I go to Italy often. I was married in Italy. My family's from there. I'm working on my citizenship right now. So I have a lot of history there. My wife loves Switzerland. We travel to Europe a lot. I really love the culture of Europe, the food of Europe. Been to Finland. I've been to Norway, which is beautiful. I've been to Belgium. I've been to France, Italy, London, Ireland a bunch of times. I had not been to Germany, but I'd been to a lot of areas with German speakers like Belgium and, of course, Switzerland. Switzerland is a part of it's Italian and the other part of it's very, very German. On this trip, I was going to Sicily to see my family. I actually went solo. My wife had a busy summer with my son in baseball. So I went to go see my family in Sicily and meet with them. And interesting, I found out that my grandfather's brother, they actually showed me the newspaper article, was fought in World War II for the Italians, got a medal from Mussolini, which was in the newspaper. They gave me the newspaper clipping of that, and I didn't know that. So that's my great uncle. That would be, it's my grandfather's brother. So I learned some World War II history there. But I will tell you, I have always been fascinated by World War II. They make fun of me on the show that when I go home, the only thing I'll watch is a World War II movie. And it's true. Like over the weekend, I probably watched 3 World War II movies. Um, I do. I love the history of World War II. I've always been fascinated. I love learning about it. So that's like just one of my interests. And people always say I wasn't very educated, but if I could go back and do it again, I really would have concentrated more on history and learning about history. But that time period is remarkable to me. In the movies, The Tattoo Artist of Auschwitz, which was a great movie I saw recently. All the Light You Cannot See. We Were the Lucky Ones. I love the movies. I love the knowledge that I can gain from them and the books as well, and just learning about that time period in history. So after I was in Sicily, I went to Germany and I had a guide, a Czech guide who lives in Germany, who actually listens to the show. And then from there, I went to Austria and I spent some time in Austria. But on my way to Germany, I'm trying to figure, okay, I wanted to go to the Neuschwanstein Castle, very famous castle that Disneyland is portrayed as. I guess the Disneyland castle was made after this castle. And then from there, I wanted to go to Dachau. I wanted to go to Dachau as a World War II buff. I wanted to learn about it and be in that presence, feel it, see it, learn from it, not shy away from it. And then the other thing we did that same day was we went to Eagle's Nest, which was the lair of Hitler right on that border of Germany and Austria that overlooks all of Austria. And again, wanted to see it and feel it and, for a moment, be a part of the history and learn and understand, because I always think that's my goal in all of this is to learn and gain knowledge from it.
So, but prior to going to Dachau and Eagle's Nest, when you found out you were going to put that in your itinerary, I'm sure you thought about everything that you knew about the Holocaust, about the horrors. Did that knowledge that you got from that, did it chiefly come from the movies, the books? Did it come more from school? And I guess when you got there, what was the biggest kind of instant like, oh, I didn't even know this happened? And it kind of maybe set yourself up to like really wanting to learn more and the most you can from the experience you're about to endure.
Yeah, so Adam, I think when I was in school, we learned a lot about the wars. History was the one subject I was probably interested in. I wish I would have spent more time in it because I was the one subject that caught my attention. I wasn't good at English. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at science, but history always caught my attention. Always fascinated by that. I mean, even going back to like the Civil War and learning about things like that, it did interest me. It gained my attention. Then I've always loved the World War II movies. Always thought that those were the best. And learning about the Battle of the Bulge. Ralph Houck was an old manager of the New York Yankees. And I remember doing an interview with Ralph Houck many years ago. This is probably 30 years ago, 28, 29 years ago, somewhere around there, right before he passed away. He was an old manager of the Yankees. And I thought the most fascinating part of the interview that we did with him is that he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Now, here I am. I've got this great Yankee manager on, and I could talk about Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, and I'm talking to him about the Battle of the Bulge because he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And he told me he had to hide in this little cabin under the straw because the Germans had come into the room, and if they found him, they would have killed him, and he had to hide. And I was just fascinated by that. And one of my good friends is Kurt Schilling, and Schilling was always a big World War II buff and collected a lot of stuff. So we would always talk about it. So I think interest from school, a lot of the movies, Midway was a great movie that I loved. I love a lot of the old movies. I watched A Bridge Too Far the other day, and I talked about it on the radio show. A World War II movie, A Bridge Too Far. Great cast, absolutely great cast of characters in the 70s. Bridge Over River Kwai. So I've always loved the movies, the new ones, the old ones, the ones that are in the middle. I've always loved that. And then, friends like Kurt Schilling who had a fascination with World War II and a knowledge of it. I always wanted to learn more and learn, and try to, figure out what happened, why it happened, and things like that. So when I was going to Germany, it was probably the first thing on my list that, okay, I'm going to be in Munich before I go to Austria. I've got to go to Dachau. I have to go. There was another concentration camp, began with an M,
Mauthausen,
Mathewson,
yeah.
that was closed on a Monday. I was leaving Hallstatt, Austria that Monday to go to Vienna. And on my way, I was going to veer off and go to that concentration camp, but it was on a Monday and they were closed that day. I would have went to that one too. But Dachau is the most important, I think, of all the concentration camps. People will say Auschwitz, but I still think that it's Dachau.
What did you get from going there? Because it's actually interesting. So I've taught about the Holocaust for years, and I also, fascinated by World War II and just really, every other topic of Jewish history. I teach, college courses about it. I've never been to any of the concentration camps. What do you think is sort of the sell for somebody who spent as much time as you have reading about it, watching movies about it, everything there? What is actually different when you're there versus what you can gain, hanging out in California or Arizona reading about it?
Feeling it, being there where it happened, where all the atrocity happened, learning about it. There was a lot of things that, and I'd love to talk about it. There were a lot of things I learned when I was there that I did not know. We know 6 million Jews died in the concentration camps, but there was a lot that I didn't know, and I did when I got there. When they first, Dachau, so to answer your question, I wanted to feel it. I wanted to be in the presence of it. I wanted to embrace it in a way that you can't do in a book. Daniel, I would recommend that you go. I would recommend that you take a trip and you walk through those gates. And the first thing that hit me was we're driving through, my guide picks me up at my hotel in Munich. We're driving to Dachau, and he says, we're about a mile away. I go, what? I'm in a residential neighborhood. What do you mean we're a mile away? This is no way. I'm thinking it's out in the boondocks. It's in the middle of nowhere. And I'm passing houses and stores, streetlights and traffic and cars. And all of a sudden he makes a left turn and I'm in Dachau. And like this all happened in like a residential neighborhood with like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And then you walk through the gates and there's a saying, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I'm not going to speak it very well, but it says work sets you free. It's the famous gate on all the concentration camp. Work sets you free. And I'll tell you, Daniel, for when you go, and I hope you go, and Adam, I hope you do too. You pull in, you park, you're walking in, you're seeing it. And then once you walk through those gates, work sets you free, it hits you. You're there. You're in history. You are in history. You are where all of that happened. The murders, the beatings, and prisoners from everywhere. I didn't know. I think when I thought of concentration camps, I mainly thought of the Jewish prisoners. At first, it wasn't the Jewish prisoners. Dachau was the only concentration camp that was open from the beginning of war to the end of the war. It is the only one. So it is people want to go to Auschwitz, and I've never been to Auschwitz, but I would like to go. But Dachau is the only one that was open from the start of the war to the end of the war. In the beginning, it wasn't Jewish prisoners. It was political prisoners. It was homosexuals. It was Jehovah's Witnesses. And then obviously it became Jewish prisoners. At one point, I just wrote this down in my notes. At one point, there were in 1944, there were 78,000 prisoners there, 78,000 prisoners at the concentration camp. So to me, the second I walk through that gate, if you don't get that feeling like, oh my God, I think there's something wrong. You just might not have feelings. And then you tour it. I was somewhat surprised that, and I'm glad they didn't, but they preserved the history. I think the fact that the Germans have preserved this history so people can learn from it so it'll never happen again is probably the reason why. But part of me thought, I wonder why they didn't just demolish this. Why did they leave this? These were Germans and their people and a lot of their ancestors, that were part of this. I'm surprised that they preserved the history. I'm glad they did, because again, it's a great learning experience. But I think many of us would be like, I would have thought they would have plowed the whole thing over and built apartment complexes or something, but they didn't. But the second you walk through those gates, it's not that you, I don't want to say, it's not like you become a prisoner yourself because you could walk out. But I think for the first time, the difference from the parking lot to inside the gates is tremendous. The feeling that you get is you're now a part of history. You're now where everything happened. The crematorium, there it is. The bathhouses, there they are. This is where they ate. This is where they hung people. This is where they beat people. This is where the SS guards were. And everything that you read and everything that you may have seen in a movie, you're now in the presence of.
Yeah, Germany gets should be given a lot of praise for how they were able to switch their society. I mean, along with the global community, which obviously poured in billions of dollars to that project as well. So it really is sort of an incredible story. And with the reparations, just one fun fact for listeners: one of the most vehement and early debates that happened in Israeli society, this is now talking about 1950s, was about whether or not to accept reparations from Germany, because that according to the no camp, this sort of absolves Germany. According to the yes camp, we should allow a path for rectification, mixed with the fact that the early state actually needed the money. So that's the fun fact for the day. So you get back and you post on social media, on your Twitter. You have hundreds of thousands of followers. What was the reaction that you got after posting about this?
The biggest debate I had was, do I post? I took a lot of photos. I took the video of my entrance into Dachau. The biggest debate I had, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, was, do I post these photos? And my answer was no. I'll talk about my experience. You could post my photos. I sent them all to Adam. I sent Adam all of my photos, all of them, everything. I took the photos because I wanted to learn. I bought the books that were there because I wanted to learn from the books. So I love knowledge. Books are knowledge. I love reading. You can see I got the little mark in this one right here because I read a little bit every night. Even though I was there and I learned everything, I still want to learn and read. The biggest debate I had was, do I post these photos? Is it insensitive to post these photos? Is it insensitive to the Jewish community to post these photos? Is it insensitive to anybody who may have been wronged in that era to be posting photos of this? Like, oh, look, it's not like I went to the Neuschwanstein Castle. There it is, the Neuschwanstein Castle. I took photos. I took video. I posted the pictures of the castle. I posted the video. I was in Sicily. I posted me at Mount Etna. When I was in Hallstatt and Salzburg, I posted videos of here's Mozart's home. This is where Mozart was born. But I wasn't sure, and I don't know the correct answer. I mean, to each his own, right? Is it insensitive to post those photos or is it not? I think Adam thought you should post them. I sent them to Adam. If you want to put some of them up on this podcast, I'm okay with that. I would approve that. But I didn't want to offend anybody by acting like I was at some, great site of history, at a famous castle, at a famous volcano, at a famous lake or river. There was a part of me that felt like if 10% of people are offended or, find this wrong, I didn't want to do that. So I didn't mind telling people that I was at Dachau, telling people about my experience, but I really debated, do I want to post a photo? Do I want to post any photos at all? So that was the hard part for me because I'm not Jewish. I don't know if a Jewish person would have taken offense to that, if they would have, thought that, hey, this is great that you were there and teaching people about it and learning about it, because, a lot of the photos of the propaganda that is out there. But then I also took photos of where they slept and where they ate and where the prisoners bathed and the yard that they would go out in and work in, because a lot of the prisoners, it was work, it was forced labor. They had to work till a lot of them till their death. A lot of people, one of the things I learned was a lot of the prisoners wanted the harder work because you got an extra ration of food. So if you you didn't want the softer work, you wanted the harder work, even though it was more difficult. You got more food. That kept you alive. So um, I don't know. It was, and Adam knows this because I talked about it with him. It was difficult to decide whether I wanted to post anything or not. So in the end, my decision was I'll speak about my experiences. I'll talk about what it was like to be there, but I'm not going to go on social media and brag like, hey, look, I was at Dachau. Here's what it looks like, because
Hmm.
of how many people suffered and died there.
I
Yeah,
will
and it's
say, just as a
unfortunate
general
because
rule, and then I'll let I think Adam has a question. Jewish people are almost never offended by well-meaning attempts to reach out, and so I always like to joke that there's enough macroaggressions against Jews that Jews don't really care for microaggressions. So I say that on campus all the time. Go for it, Adam.
yeah, no, so yeah, and that's the first thing, and it's interesting because the first time I was on Daniel's podcast, him and I talked about having Jewish allies, and do we have them out there? And it was clear to me that you're one of them, Gambadoro. You're a Jewish ally, for your support, and that was clear when I was talking to you. And for context too, I know you mentioned about how they preserved Dachau. The Nazis did try to destroy as much evidence as they could prior to all the liberations of the camps and then their eventual defeat, because many of them would have gone to trial. They knew that, and many did, but a lot of evidence was destroyed. But Dachau was preserved, which is incredible, for the sake of history. But and for you, I know it's you're on a quest to learn, right? Get all this knowledge. And that's something we should all model ourselves off. Whether it's learning about World War II, whether it's learning about the evils of Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, and just pretty much any subject to help us move forward and make sure that if we, all the tragedies and all the torture and the famine and the chaos of the past, we don't repeat it. Um, but there's also that emotional impact, right? When you're going through something like Dachau, seeing all the methods of death, the way that they executed prisoners, whether it was through work from morning to night, whether it was through beatings, whether it's through the gas chambers, through any method. So as you're going through that and you're learning about, I mean, really, death is the common theme, right? That's not everyone's favorite subject. So how did it feel emotionally when you're learning about all these different methods of punishment and knowing that so many humans, right, just like the three of us, so many humans had to lose their lives, had to be murdered because of these evil, torturous methods? And of course, we do know that Dachau and like other camps had evil medical practices where
Mhm.
prisoners were selected and gone through the worst of torture with these evil medical experiences, and that's how they died. So what was it like emotionally learning about all that and then knowing like human beings really were murdered in these methods?
Watched the World War II movie last night called Downfall, and it was like Hitler's last days, as told by his secretary, who was there right up until the end. The movie was called Downfall. It was in German. I watched it with subtitles, because again, like I will watch a World War II movie over anything else if I have the opportunity. Um, so obviously that they tried to destroy all of the paperwork, as much paperwork as possible. After Hitler committed suicide and Himmler thought there was a chance for him to kind of take over, but they did destroy a lot of the paperwork. But yeah, Dachau remained, and a lot of other things did remain. They weren't able to. The Allied forces got in there and they prevented anything from being um, taken down, taken apart. So there was a lot of history that's preserved. And when you go through Dachau, you see it, because the prisoners had to fill out a form in pencil because it could have been, so it would easily be erased. So you learn about all the prisoners, the Czech prisoners, the Italian prisoners, the Spanish prisoners, the prisoners that were homosexual, the prisoners that were Jewish, the prisoners that were Jehovah's Witnesses. You also learn there were a lot of other little concentration camps around Dachau. I never knew that, but there were like hundreds of concentration camps, smaller ones, right around Dachau. Um, I think there was a part when I got to the medical experiments and they were trying to find out about altitude and cold icy waters. A lot of pilots got shot down in cold icy waters. So they would take a prisoner and they'd put him in a pilot's outfit and they'd put him in cold icy waters and I'd say, I'm going to see how long you can live until you die. And I think that's the first point where I like, wow. And I started to cry. When I got done with it, I almost felt like I don't know if you could walk through this and not have tears in your eyes. You might not be human. I don't know if you can. Maybe you can, but I couldn't. Um, what they would do, like they would take people up to high altitude. So how high can this person go, hanging from the plane before they, die? How long can you stay in icy water before you die? You were going to die, because of all the medical experiments that they were doing on people. And it was crazy to think that that's how people died. Hey, okay, that's it. You've been chosen for death, and it's going to be a slow, painful death, and your brain's going to explode. And so we all knew that prisoners died in the concentration camps. 6 million Jewish prisoners died in the concentration camps. We knew that. But when you see when you find out about the beatings and you see the photos of the beatings and the hangings, people wanted to die. There were people that wanted to die. I'm going to try to escape it. I'm just because I can't live like this. They were starving. They were cold. They were mistreated. They were abused. And the beatings you find out how many beatings they enjoyed beating the prisoners. They enjoyed it, sometimes to death. So I think that's the part where I kind of broke down and really started to cry about it. I had to take a moment. I had to take, you go from reading one piece of information to another and viewing everything. And at some point you have to just step back and just, okay, I'm gonna try to make it through this exhibit. But it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's not. If you go there and you just look, but if you go there to learn, if you go there to read and not just look at photos, but read what is written under the photos as to why that photo exists, I think it becomes a lot more difficult to get through when you see the atrocities that happened. So, and it's big. You walk into Dachau, it's big. You see the crematorium, you see the barracks again, like you see where they went to the bathroom, you see where they showered, you see where they ate, you see where they slept and how they slept and where they were punished and the torture. And it became difficult to get through. And I wasn't aware of that when I first went, because I don't think I've ever been to a historical site. I went to Mount Etna in Sicily. It wasn't going to make me cry. I've been to, all the, I was actually at the spot. Hitler was killed in Lake Como, in an area of Lake Como, not in Milan. His body was taken to Milan, and that's where it was hung up. But he was actually killed. I went to the town in Lake Como, in part of Lake Como, where Hitler was killed on a previous trip. But a lot of the things that you go to see in your life with your family or by yourself, there are moments to celebrate, their enjoyment, that you get to see something special where a movie was formed. And then you get to Dachau, it's just completely different. It's different. It's
with all
not
this in
something to
mind, what do
celebrate.
you think, sort of a little bit of a tangent, but I think sort of bringing this back to America and making it more practical, there's obviously a worrying uptick in anti-Semitism, spoken about that ad nauseum, so we don't have to go in that direction. But what do you think, from your vantage point, is the best way to fight against anti-Semitism, let's say, talking about in the American mainstream?
It's a good question. I don't want to get very political on this show, because I know a lot of the universities have had issues with that, and I know that they're, working on that. I don't understand it. To me, I just, I'm one of those people. Just let everybody live their life and be who they are, no matter what they are, because you got one life and you got to be happy. But I think what you're doing, the podcast, keeping history alive, so people could understand, like, everybody says that, right? Okay, this is why Dachau exists and Auschwitz, so we can learn from the mistakes of our past and never have it happen again. But, then you see the way people act sometimes, and it's like, okay, are they not learning from the mistakes of the past? And we talk about it, right? We can talk about it till we're blue in the face. Oh, we have to learn from the mistakes of the past, and we can teach about it. And I mean, I think it probably starts in education. It probably starts in education, and but do you have the right educators teaching these people? I think, that's a question. I don't know. I never went to college, but I know a lot of the anti-Semitism and the issues that have been on mainstream college campuses or that are being addressed. I know when I was in Ireland a few years ago for St. Paddy's Day, and I met these people from Israel. We became friends. And when the bombardments of Israel started, and I checked with them, like, how are you? Are you safe? Are you okay? I met two people in Ireland on St. Paddy's Day, and we became friends on Facebook. And they took pictures and sent it to me. We're in the shelter. We're staying. The bombings of Israel were taking place, and these people that I'm friends with are in a shelter, and I'm in my home. It's hot out at 72 degrees. I can go in my pool. I can go in my jacuzzi. I can go to I can live my life however I want to live it. And these friends of mine are fearing for their life in a shelter. I met them in Ireland, and we just became friends. I love meeting new people. I love traveling and meeting new people. It's one of my favorite things to do. You become friends with somebody on Instagram. You become friends with somebody on Facebook. I was in Finland and I met this guy from Syria, and he learns from me. I learn from him, and because Syria is going through a lot of issues. But we became friends. My Jewish friends in Israel, to see those photos of them in the shelter was shocking to me because, look, let's just call it like it is, Rabbi. Normal American people that live their lives without any fear of anything have no understanding of how others are living that are in war-torn countries and dealing with that. So that was fascinating to me. So I mean, I think it just has. I think the only way is just continued education, but it's got to be the right education.
When we think about the horrors of the Holocaust, and we think about growing up in our educational system, like for me, we learned about World War II, but it was a really broad stroke. It was like, here's all the major actors, the players, here's the major events, and then boom, you're on to the next chapter. There's not really that focus where you can actually take the time to really understand all the nuts and bolts that went into the Nazi regime and what they implemented. This mass murder and the genocide of the Jewish people and of other identities and cultures. And now, as you mentioned, we are in a state where Jewish people, where there's an unprecedented amount of anti-Semitism, and it actually, when we start engaging with people, now the next generation, about what they know about World War II, about the Holocaust, it's almost as if schools may have now omitted even more, just because now there's maybe more history to go through, or they want to, really get to other subjects. But now there's even less understanding among a newer generation of Americans about the horrors of the Holocaust and even about the history of anti-Semitism. So I guess my question is, from this experience and from everything that now you accumulated with your knowledge, in addition to uh, the schools doing more to teach about these things, what do you think the role is for maybe someone like you, for example, as somebody with the status that you have, now that you've gone through this experience, now that you're sharing it today on this podcast, what do you think moving forward? How do you think your role would be in trying to educate, especially a younger generation, about the horrors of the Holocaust and about the horrors of anti-Semitism?
Adam, I mean, because I debated with you, do I do this podcast? Do I not do it? So my role is coming on this podcast and talking to you about my experience. I don't know that it'll go any further than that. If people ask me about what it was like to be at Eagle's Nest, which you guys haven't asked me about that, but I was at Eagle's Nest, which is a restaurant now, believe it or not. And there's a gift shop there, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why there's a gigantic souvenir shop at Eagle's Nest, but there was. But I don't know. I felt it'd be wrong to buy a shirt that said Eagle's Nest on it. Like to me, like I couldn't understand the purchasing of, memorabilia from there. But I did want to see it and be a part of it. My thing is, and especially with my job, I don't want to get political, and I'm sure there's a political angle to all of this, and I'm not going to go there because I don't want to. But in coming on your podcast, I'm able to talk to you about my experience. Rabbi Daniel hasn't been to Dachau. I have. You guys haven't been to Eagle's Nest. I have. I could talk to you about those experiences. And if it inspires somebody to learn more, if it inspires somebody to, hey, I'm going to Germany. I never thought about that. Maybe I'll go to Munich and I'll go walk through Dachau. I don't know how many people you reach, but if some of those people end up deciding, I want to go see that, I want to go be a part of that, maybe they buy the books and they learn more from that, then, that would be my role. Again, my role, I'm a sportscaster. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I got a daughter getting married next year. I've got retirement on the horizon. I've got my job.
Don't mention you're retiring, Gambo, because
Uh,
as somebody following you for 30 years, since fourth grade, when you did your Thursday Arizona sports report on Fox Arizona with Brad Steinke and all that, I've been
yeah.
following you since then. So you were saying you were going to retire is getting me nervous because
Well,
what are we going to do without you?
I am going to. But when you ask me like what my role in this whole thing is, like, I mean, it's just in all honesty, you talked me into coming on this podcast. I debated it because again, I didn't know if you were going to ask political questions. I didn't want to go there, but it hasn't been. I appreciate that because I wanted to talk about my experience at Dachau, what I learned and how I learned, and what my fascination with World War II is. And again, the only thing I could say is if and you could post the pictures that you have, Adam. I sent you my photos. I didn't want to post them socially because I didn't know if anybody would take exception to it or but if anybody's inspired by this and they want to learn more and they want to read the book I'm reading now is That Was Dachau, 1933 to 1945. I picked this up while I was at Dachau. This is the book. The photos of everything that happened are in this book. That if people are inspired, I purchased both of these books when I was at Dachau in their little gift shop. If people are inspired to go to Dachau or Eagle's Nest or read the book or watch one of the World War II movies or just learn something for it, I don't know that my role is anything more than that. Coming on with you guys and explaining my experience. And if you talk to other people that have had similar experiences, it's, to me would be, more your responsibility in the Jewish community to pass this information along to others using me as, hey, here's somebody not Jewish, here's his experience, here's what it's like. And again, I'm, if anything, just inspiring other people to learn more about what happened.
Amazing. Well, John, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Adam.